Chapter 1. The Day I Was Erased. What would you do if your own family legally erased you? They didn't just betray me. My own family had me declared legally dead, took my inheritance, and lived 8 years believing I would never come back. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I waited. This is not a story about anger or violence, but about calculated revenge, family betrayal, and justice that arrived exactly on time. This is my story, told by MC Ding Swan. I am standing across the street from the house my mother bought with the money that was supposed to be mine. Federal agents are moving in tight lines across the driveway, their radios low and constant. Firefighters wait near their engines, helmets tucked under their arms, watching a place that once looked like safety. The house is quiet, white stone, trimmed hedges, a perfect image. People in this town slow down when they pass it. They always have. I feel nothing when I look at it. No fear, no shaking, just a clean, unsettling calm. This is what it feels like when betrayal comes from inside your own family, and there is nothing left to hope for. For most of my life, I believed fear was the strongest emotion a person could carry. I was wrong. Absence is stronger. The absence of trust, the absence of safety, the absence of the need to explain yourself to anyone ever again. That is what settles in my chest now. I am not afraid of my mother anymore. I am not afraid of the woman who chose money over her daughter. The last time I stood this close to her house, I was 19 years old. It was the summer of 2017, and I believed I was going home. I grew up in a quiet coastal town in Connecticut, the kind of place where people know your last name before they know your story. My parents divorced when I was 11. Everyone said it was amicable. That word meant my mother smiled through it, and my father learned how to live with disappointment without making it visible. My father, Thomas Caldwell, was a firefighter. He believed in systems and procedures. If something broke, you fixed it. If someone was hurt, you called for help. He raised me to believe the world worked that way too. Justice might take time, but it arrived eventually if you followed the rules. My mother, Evelyn Caldwell, believed in something else. She believed in perception, in being admired, in making sure people saw what she wanted them to see and nothing more. She was warm in public, generous in ways that made people feel chosen. Neighbors trusted her instantly. Teachers listened to her. Friends leaned in when she spoke. At home, love felt conditional. Approval had to be earned. I spent most of my childhood learning how to be small enough to keep the peace and quiet enough not to disappoint her. The only person who ever spoke to me honestly about my mother was my grandmother, Ruth Caldwell. She built her life from nothing, one small property, then another, then land. She read contracts the way other people read novels. She never rushed a decision and never trusted appearances. When I was younger, she took me with her to job sites. She showed me how to read the fine print people hoped you would skip. She told me money did not ruin families, it revealed them. At the time, I thought she was cynical. I did not understand she was preparing me. My grandmother died in early 2016. She was 82, quietly, without drama. A year later, a trust she had set up long before was scheduled to vest. $3.9 million. The money would transfer to me when I turned 19. My mother spoke about that money as if it were already hers. She talked about renovations, about travel, about how it would finally allow us to breathe again. I nodded and listened, trying not to feel the weight of something I did not ask for. When she learned the truth, that I was the sole beneficiary and the trust was not hers to control, something in her changed. It was not loud, it was colder than that. The warmth in her voice faded. The questions became sharper. What did I plan to do with the money? Who was advising me? Did I really think I was ready to handle that kind of responsibility? She still hugged me, she still smiled in public, but the approval I had spent my life chasing disappeared overnight. Not long after, my mother remarried. His name was Richard Hale. He worked in property development. He spoke carefully, choosing words that sounded reasonable and calm. He was polite to me, distant in a way that felt intentional. When he looked at me, it was not with affection, it was with calculation, like someone deciding how much risk a problem carried. The night before my 19th birthday, I went to a small gathering with friends from my community college. Nothing reckless. Cake, music, conversations about exams and summer jobs. I checked my phone too often. My mother had texted twice asking when I would be home. I told her I was fine. I told her not to worry. When I stepped outside to leave, Richard was waiting in his car. He said my mother had asked him to pick me up so I would not have to walk alone. He said it casually, like it was an afterthought. I hesitated for a moment. Something tightened in my chest. A quiet warning I did not yet know how to trust. Then I got in the car. We drove in silence at first. He asked about school, about my plans after my birthday, about what I wanted to do with my life. I answered automatically. He handed me a bottle of water and said I looked tired. I remember the taste. Metallic. Wrong. I remember thinking I should stop drinking it. I remember not wanting to seem rude. When I woke up, the room was unfamiliar. Concrete walls, a single light overhead, a mattress on the floor. I tried to move and realized I could not. Panic came fast and sharp. I screamed until my throat burned. I pounded on the door until my hands hurt. No one came. Richard eventually did. He spoke to me the same way he always had, calm, controlled. He said there had been a change of plans. He said my mother was worried about me. He said this was temporary and for my own good. When I demanded to see her, he told me her car was parked outside. I did not believe him until I heard her voice later that night, soft, familiar, telling me to calm down, telling me she loved me, telling me this was necessary. I thought I was going home. I did not know that trust would cost me 8 years of my life. Now, as agents move through the house across the street, I finally understand what my grandmother tried to teach me. Money does not destroy families, it exposes them. And some betrayals are planned long before anyone realizes they are being erased. Chapter 2. A Family That Needed Me Gone. I learned what real silence sounded like on a concrete floor beneath a light that never turned off. When I opened my eyes, the first thing I noticed was the smell. Cold air mixed with damp stone and something metallic that clung to the back of my throat. My head throbbed. My tongue felt thick and slow. For a few seconds, I thought I was still in the car, halfway between sleep and waking. Then I tried to move. My wrists tightened instantly. Plastic zip ties, deliberately snug, not cutting skin, just enough to remind me I was not in control. My ankles were free, but the angle of the cot made it useless. Whoever had done this knew exactly how much restraint was necessary and how much would draw attention later. I sucked in a sharp breath and forced myself to look around. Bare concrete walls, water stains crawling down one corner, a narrow cot with a thin mattress, a bucket pushed against the wall, no window, no clock, just the light overhead buzzing faintly, and my own breathing, fast and uneven. "Mom," I called out, my voice already cracking. "Evelyn." The name echoed back to me, thin and useless. I pulled once at the ties, harder than I should have. Pain shot up my arms and settled into my shoulders. Panic surged, hot and disorienting. I screamed then, not because I thought someone would hear me, but because my body needed the sound to exist. I kicked at the door until my ankle throbbed. Nothing answered me. No voices, no footsteps, only that hum, steady and indifferent. When the door finally opened, it was almost a relief. Richard Hale stepped inside like he was entering an office conference room. His shirt was neatly pressed, sleeves rolled just enough to look casual. His hair was perfect. He carried a plastic cup of water and a folded towel, the way someone might approach a minor inconvenience. He looked at me without surprise. "You are awake," he said. "Where is my mother?" I said. He set the cup down on a small metal shelf, just out of my reach. That was not an accident. "Your mother is fine," he said, calmly. "You are fine too, if you cooperate." I stared at him, my heart hammering so hard it hurt. "You drugged me," I said. "You kidnapped me." He did not react to the word. "We intervened," he said, "before you made a decision that would have followed you for the rest of your life." I laughed once, sharp and hollow. "You tied me up in a basement," I said. "You think that is an intervention?" Richard crouched slowly, careful to stay outside the reach of my legs. "Your grandmother left you a significant inheritance," he said. "You are young, emotional. You do not have the capacity to manage that kind of responsibility." The word hit me like a slap. "The trust?" I said. His jaw tightened for half a second, then smoothed again. "Yes," he said, "the trust." "That money is mine," I said. "She left it to me." Richard stood, brushing imaginary dust from his pants. "On paper," he said, "paper can be managed." I stared at him, trying to understand how someone could sound so reasonable while describing my erasure. "You cannot do this," I said. "People will notice. My father will notice." Richard turned toward the door, then paused. "Your father believes in rules," he said. "That will slow him down." He looked back at me, his expression cool and measured. "Your mother's car is outside," he added. "She will come when she is ready." Something inside me froze. "No," I said. "She would never agree to this." Richard studied me, then nodded once, almost kindly. "Your mother is practical," he said. "She is choosing stability over sentiment." The door closed. When it opened again, it was her. Evelyn walked in as if nothing was wrong, composed, perfumed, hair flawless. She carried a folded blanket over her arm like she was visiting someone with the flu. "Mom," I whispered. She set the blanket on the cot and smoothed it with both hands, careful not to look at the ties around my wrists. "You need to calm down," she said. "You are making this harder than it needs to be." Tears blurred my vision. I hated that my first instinct was to beg. "Please," I said, "let me go. I will do whatever you want. I will sign something. Just get me out of here." She finally looked at me. Her eyes were not cruel. They were tired, irritated, like I was a problem that had refused to solve itself. "I am doing this for you," she said. "For me?" I whispered. She exhaled slowly. "Your grandmother set you up to fail," she said. "She wanted to punish me by putting everything in your name. Do you know how humiliating that is? To have your future controlled by a teenager?" "It is my money," I said. "She left it to me." Evelyn leaned closer. "Not if you're not capable," she said. "Not if you disappear. People will understand that. You have been difficult lately, emotional, unstable." A cold realization settled in my chest. "You are going to tell them I ran away," I said. She straightened. "We are going to protect the family," she said. "This is about stability." Richard appeared in the doorway behind her. Evelyn glanced at him briefly, then continued. "There is a document, a power of attorney. It allows me to manage your affairs until you are well again." I shook my head. "I am fine," I said. "I am right here." Evelyn's expression did not change. "That's not how this works," she said. "The right doctor will agree. The paperwork will say what it needs to say." Then she turned and left. After that, the days blurred. Richard brought food, clean clothes. He spoke like a manager checking progress. Evelyn came rarely. When she did, she acted like I was an inconvenience she was waiting to outlast. Within a week after I disappeared, my face was everywhere. Richard came down one night with a folded newspaper and held it where I could see. "Local teen missing after leaving party." My photo stared back at me. Too young, too trusting. Beneath it was a quote from my mother about hope and faith and keeping the family together. I pressed my lips together, fighting the urge to scream. "They're looking," I whispered. Richard adjusted the zip tie on my wrist, just enough to remind me where I was. "For now," he said, "but this was never a kidnapping. This was a planned family betrayal, and the story had already begun to change." Chapter 3. 8 years, no one came. Time stopped feeling real after that. Days no longer arrived cleanly, they bled into each other, measured only by light, hunger, and the sound of the door opening. In the beginning, I counted everything: meals, footsteps, the seconds between Richard's visits. I believed that if I stayed alert enough, someone outside would stay alert too. During the first year, hope kept me breathing. Richard brought a small television downstairs once a week. He never left it long, just enough to let the images settle before carrying it back upstairs like a controlled experiment. My face on the screen, my name scrolling underneath. Missing 19-year-old college student. Local authorities request information. I leaned forward as far as the restraints allowed, memorizing every word. One evening, the screen showed my father. He stood outside the fire station, microphones pointed toward him, his uniform pressed the way he always kept it. His hands were clasped tightly, knuckles pale. "If anyone has seen my daughter," he said, voice steady but strained, "please come forward. We just want her home." My chest tightened so sharply I had to press my forehead against the concrete to keep from sobbing. I cried silently, terrified Richard would hear and decide I no longer deserved to watch. When the segment ended, the screen went dark. "They're searching," Richard said as he unplugged the television. "That should comfort you." It did, for a while. The second phase began quietly. I noticed the change before he ever acknowledged it. My face stopped leading the broadcasts. Then it disappeared altogether. Weather reports replaced my name. Traffic updates took my place. One afternoon, years after I had stopped asking what day it was, Richard came down carrying a thin folder. He did not sit. He did not offer water. "This is official," he said. 5 years is the threshold." I stared at the papers, struggling to understand the language. Presumed deceased. I laughed, the sound hollow and wrong. "I'm standing right here," I said. Richard nodded, unbothered. "The law doesn't require a body after 5 years," he said, "only absence." That was the moment I understood something fundamental. I was not missing. I had been deliberately erased. A private memorial was held. I did not see it, but Richard described it carefully. Who attended, what flowers were chosen, what my mother wore. He told me she cried. He said people admired her strength. Because the power of attorney had been signed early, the trust was no longer contested. Probate closed quietly. Everything moved exactly the way it was designed to. After that, hope became heavier than fear. The third stage arrived without warning. Every year on my birthday, my mother came. She never stayed long. She stood just inside the doorway, impeccably dressed, eyes scanning the room the way someone checks a rental before leaving. "You're still here," she would say. It was never a question. She did not ask how I slept or what I dreamed about. She asked if I was ready to be reasonable, if I understood how much trouble I had caused. One year, she held up her phone. A new house. White stone, perfect hedges, European vacations, Bethany smiling on a balcony somewhere warm and expensive. Then I saw him. Evan stood beside Bethany, arm around her waist, smiling easily into the sun. My stomach dropped. I said nothing. I learned quickly that silence protected me better than questions ever had. Later, I learned Evan had received a message years earlier, an anonymous tip suggesting I might still be alive. He dismissed it. He probably told himself it was none of his business. It was easier not to know. That realization settled into me slowly, like rust. By then, I was numb enough to survive it.
By 2024, survival had become routine. The final stage began with Rosa. She was quiet, efficient, careful not to draw attention, but I recognized something in her eyes the first time she hesitated at the door. Fear, familiar and practiced. She never spoke at first. She moved quickly, eyes lowered, but sometimes her hands shook when she set the tray down. Sometimes she lingered a second longer than necessary. One afternoon, without looking at me, she whispered, "Don't drink that yet." I waited until she left. The water tasted normal. Still, I did not finish it. Over time, she left small things behind: a folded napkin, a pen. Once, an old phone slipped from her apron and skidded across the floor. She froze. I nudged it back to her with my foot. Our eyes met for a second. She whispered, "I'll come back." I did not call right away. I waited. I watched. I learned the rhythm of the house. I learned how long Richard stayed upstairs and how long he was gone. When Rosa returned, she slid a scrap of paper beneath the tray. "Your father never stopped looking." I pressed the paper to my chest, feeling something shift inside me. Not hope, resolve. For 8 years, the world believed I was dead. For the first time since I disappeared, I was no longer waiting to be found. I was preparing to leave.
Chapter 4. The Trap They Walked Into. The plan did not begin with running. It began with listening. I waited until I understood the house better than the people who believed they owned it. I learned the hours when Richard stayed upstairs on conference calls. I learned when deliveries arrived and when the security system reset itself. I learned which locks mattered and which ones existed only to make people feel in control. By early 2025, I knew the rhythm well enough to step outside it. The night I left was quiet until it wasn't. Rosa slid the key across the tray without looking at me. "You have 10 minutes, she whispered. "That's all I can give you." I closed my fingers around the key. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. "I won't forget this," I said. She shook her head once. "Just go." The door opened easily, too easily. As I stepped into the hallway, a security camera at the far end rotated slightly, adjusting its angle. My breath caught. For a split second, I thought I had miscalculated. Then the light blinked and reset, exactly the way I had seen it do dozens of times before. I moved. Outside, the air hit my lungs like a shock, cold, sharp, real. I did not run toward the road. I ran toward the trees, toward darkness, toward anything that was not concrete and keys and controlled voices. A truck engine started somewhere in the distance, and I forced myself not to panic. I kept moving until my legs burned and my chest felt raw. No one followed. Marcus found me 2 days later at a clinic outside Albany. He froze when he saw me, like his brain needed time to catch up with his eyes. Then he crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled me into his arms. "I knew," he said, voice breaking. "I knew you were alive." He held me like I might disappear again if he let go. Later, when I could breathe without shaking, he told me everything. He never stopped filing reports, never stopped calling departments, never stopped following tips that went nowhere. Every attempt ended the same way. No evidence of life. They told him hope was not proof. Howard Price explained it without anger. Howard had been a district attorney for over 20 years. He had the kind of calm that came from seeing too much to be impressed by anything. He listened while Marcus spoke, then folded his hands. "What they did was deliberate," he said. "They removed every legal reason for the system to move." "So what do we need?" I asked. Howard met my eyes. "A confession," he said, "or a clean chain of evidence. Ideally, both." We started where my grandmother always told me to start. The house she left behind in New Haven had been untouched since her death. Diane never liked it. She said it felt old, heavy. I asked Howard if I could enter. "You own it," he said. She made sure of that. Walking through that house felt like stepping into a preserved memory. Dust coated the furniture, light filtered through lace curtains, the air smelled faintly of paper and polish. I stopped in the hallway where my grandmother's portrait still hung. She used to tap the wall beside it and smile. "People hide things where they feel untouchable," she told me once. The safe was exactly where it had always been. Inside were documents I had never been meant to see. A secondary trust worth $1.6 million. It was structured to activate only if fraud was proven in the handling of the primary trust. Beneath it was a small flash drive. Howard examined it later in his office. He hesitated. "Audio files," he said. "Conversations about power of attorney, about managing risk, about making problems disappear." I felt something settle inside me, not rage, precision. This was not anger, this was calculated justice. We could have gone to the authorities then. I chose not to. "She won't deny it," I said. "She never does." Howard nodded slowly. "Then let her talk." I texted my mother from a number she did not recognize. "I miss you. I want to talk." She replied within minutes. "Of course. I've always wanted to help you." We exchanged messages for days. I stayed careful, apologetic, soft. "I was confused back then," I wrote. "I know you were just trying to protect me." Her replies warmed. "You were fragile," she said. "You needed someone to make the hard choices." I asked questions I already knew the answers to. Why did you take control of everything? Why didn't you wait for me? She answered without hesitation. "You weren't capable. You were unstable. I did what had to be done." Each message was saved, time-stamped, verified. The final one came when I asked if she ever regretted it. "I regret that it had to be done, but it was necessary." Howard closed his laptop. "That's enough," he said. "She gave us the confession herself." The call came the next morning. Federal charges, conspiracy, fraud, unlawful confinement. Howard looked at me across his desk. "Ready for what comes next?" I thought of the light that never turned off, the years the world believed I was dead, the silence that kept me alive. "Yes," I said. For the first time since I disappeared, I was not reacting to what they had done. I was deciding how justice would finally arrive.
Chapter 5. What survives after justice? Justice did not arrive with shouting or sirens the way I once imagined it would. It arrived quietly, early in the morning, while the sky was still pale and undecided. I was sitting at the small kitchen table in my father's house when my phone rang, an unfamiliar number. I knew before I answered. "It's done," Howard said. His voice was steady, controlled. "They're moving now." I closed my eyes and felt my shoulders drop for the first time in years. By noon, the story was everywhere. Federal agents executed coordinated warrants across multiple locations. One of them was the house my mother loved most, the one she renovated obsessively, the one she believed proved she had won. Another was Richard's office, tucked behind glass and polished wood. When Richard realized how much evidence had already been secured, he panicked. He locked himself inside the office and tried to destroy documents he thought no one knew existed. Smoke alarms triggered before the fire could spread. Firefighters arrived within minutes. Federal agents followed close behind. The irony did not go unnoticed. The arrests were public by design. Cameras lined the street. Neighbors gathered behind police tape, whispering and filming. My mother was escorted out in handcuffs. Her hair was undone. Her face looked unfamiliar without control holding it in place. For the first time, she was not directing the narrative. This was not revenge fueled by anger. This was justice finally served. The legal consequences followed quickly. Richard faced multiple federal charges related to conspiracy, financial fraud, and unlawful confinement. My mother was charged with financial crimes tied to abuse of power of attorney and coordinated deception. Their attorneys spoke carefully, the evidence did not. Text messages, audio recordings, timelines that could no longer be explained away. The family betrayal was over. The truth had won. Bethany and Evan were not arrested. There was no criminal threshold to charge them. Silence, it turned out, was not always illegal, but it was visible. Their names appeared in articles anyway, not as defendants, but as people who had known enough to question and chose not to. Old messages resurfaced. Questions followed them into rooms they could no longer control. Some consequences arrive without courtrooms. My father watched the coverage from the same chair where he had once sat calling police departments that told him to wait. He did not smile, he did not cry. He exhaled. "I told them," he said softly. "I told them you were alive." The secondary trust was released within weeks, $1.6 million, untouched for years, activated exactly as my grandmother intended. Holding the paperwork felt less like receiving money and more like receiving proof that someone had seen what might happen and prepared for it. She had left me leverage, not rescue. I used it carefully. The Whitcomb Foundation began quietly, no press release, no ceremony, just paperwork, conversations, and intention. It focuses on women reported missing but dismissed too quickly, women labeled unstable, women who disappear without enough noise to force action. It does not promise miracles, it promises attention. As the months passed, the public noise around my case faded. New scandals replaced it. New stories demanded attention. That was fine with me. I did not want to be known for what was done to me. I wanted to be known for what remained. People asked if I forgave my mother. I learned to answer honestly. I didn't forgive her to erase what she did. I forgave her so I wouldn't stay trapped inside it. Forgiveness did not soften the facts. It did not return the years I lost. It did not excuse silence or manipulation. It simply allowed me to move forward without carrying her choices as my identity. Karma, I learned, does not need spectacle. It does not need rage. It arrives when the truth is finally allowed to stand on its own. I did not win because I was louder. I won because I waited, watched, and chose the moment when honesty could no longer be dismissed. Some women survive quietly. Others choose to stand back up. If you are listening to this and you have ever been erased, ignored, or made to believe your voice did not matter, remember this: silence can keep you alive. Choosing yourself is what lets you live. If stories about justice, healing, and women reclaiming their lives resonate with you, stay here. Subscribe, share your thoughts, and be part of a space where survival is respected and standing up is celebrated. Survival was only the beginning.